It is very inefficient to try and build muscle and lose body fat at the same time. The first phase is fat loss. And to lose body fat from your body, you have to. Tracking your calories does not cause eating disorders. People with pre-existing eating disorders sometimes may struggle with calorie counting because it gets obsessive. You should look to average between a pound to a per week of loss. If you look at your naked body in the mirror and you say, I want to take things away. I want to reduce body fat in this area. Today, I'm going to do something really special. I'm going to take the 4 phases of body transformation and I'm going to go over each phase in detail. I'm going to ask all the questions, I'm going to answer all the questions that you all have had or asked on social media about the nuances of each phase. And I'm just going to give you a huge deep dive into the way that I believe body transformation is best done, how you can not only lose weight, but lose body fat, retain muscle, add shape to your body, maintain the results forever, get out of the yo-yo weight loss diet fad fuckery that everyone stays in, demystify everything around body transformation and body composition change to the point where if you listen to this or watch this, if you're on YouTube, and you apply the principles that I'm going to lay out for you today in this very simple process, you'll never need a coach, you'll never need a program. Now, disclaimer, why does coaching exist if that's the case? Well, coaching is about what happens between your ears. I'm going to tell you everything you need to do in order to get body results, in order to lose weight, in order to maintain it for the rest of your life, to where your after photo, quote unquote, lasts forever, to where you look and feel great at 90, to where you can attain that body that you keep envying in the fitness influencer and yet can't seem to progress toward. But I also want to drive the fact home that the majority of making the progress and keeping the results for life happens between the ears and in your heart, because there are things that people are battling on a day-to-day basis that are keeping you from decreasing the gap between what you say and what you live. And that is what a coach does. We are your blind spot. We help you know what to do when you plateau. We're the one to talk you off the ledge when you feel like quitting, and you will, because this is programming we're battling, right? Without further ado, with all that being said, let's get into it. The 4 phases. So, phase 1 is fat loss. Phase 2 is tissue building or muscle tissue development. Phase 3 is body fat reduction, this time with an increased basal metabolic rate. And I'll explain this in detail. And phase 4 is maintenance for life, to where you just live the values you've now cultivated in phases 1 through 3 with the added results of an increased basal metabolic rate and a leaner body composition and the ability to lose body fat at a higher calorie count. And so many other benefits across the board. Why do we want to do body transformation in phases? You want to do body transformation in phases because it is very inefficient to try and build muscle and lose body fat at the same time. To build muscle tissue, you need a caloric surplus. You need to consume more calories than you're expending consistently over time. You can't create matter on your body. You can't create tissue on your body without material with which to create it with, right? So you can't, and this is why it always comes back to an energy balance. If you can't lose weight, you're not in a caloric deficit. If you can't gain weight, you're not in a caloric surplus. The very definition of a caloric deficit means you're consuming less energy than you're expending. You're at a deficit of energy, and therefore you shed matter from your body, whether it be body fat or muscle. By the same token, you can't add matter, tissue, muscle, etc. to your body without excess material left over at the end of the day. And there's no debating that, okay? Can you gain muscle in a caloric deficit? Yes. It's possible, but it's very difficult. You have to live a very optimal lifestyle under very optimal conditions. And my content is for the average person who's trying to cultivate values and follow a process that you can repeat for the rest of your life. So all that being said, doing things in phases helps you make substantial progress one way or the other, and not stay in the perpetual hamster wheel that most people stay in, which is trying to do both at once and not making any progress. So in that pursuit, if you commit a substantial amount of time in either direction, not only will you actually make progress for the first time in your life, because this shit takes time, you can't do it overnight, but you'll allow yourself the time to make the behavior modifications to make these habits and values and tools that you gain persist for the rest of your life. It's not about weight loss. It's about body composition change and cultivating values to get you off of suckling the teat of a program or coaching or a weight loss drug. Okay, this is about a life that you will live. It is about values that you'll cultivate in this process. So the first phase is fat loss. And to lose body fat from your body, you have to be in a caloric deficit. How do you know you're in a caloric deficit? If you're losing weight consistently, you're in a caloric deficit. That's the simple way to put it. If you want to guarantee that you're in a caloric deficit, then you need to be consuming less calories than you're expending, and you need to be tracking your calories to ensure that you are doing so. If you want to know how many calories that you should eat to be in a caloric deficit, then you should I recommend making it very simple. You should take your goal weight in pounds and multiply it by 12. That'll give you a total calorie goal to shoot for. If you're on the shorter spectrum, 5'2" or under maybe, current weight times 10 can work. People who are shorter are always going to have to consume less calories than people of average height because there's just less of you. There's less body, and therefore you don't need as many calories to run your body. So that's why shorter people need to probably consume a little bit less usually. And a lot of this hinges on, the amount of calories that you consume also hinges on other things like your lean body mass, your age, etc. But I'm here to give you the most simple guidance ever to get progress and just stop thinking and start doing. So in that pursuit, take your goal weight in pounds, multiply it by 12. That'll give you an overarching calorie goal to follow for weight loss. You do not have to take any more calories from that goal. You are in a deficit as soon as you calculate that number. Do not worry about calories burned, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and knock that question out. If your app that you're using to track, like MyFitnessPal, gives you an amount of calories burned, or if your Apple Watch, etc., gives you an amount of calories burned and it's adding it to your calorie total, ignore that shit, okay? The software used to calculate calories burned is very inaccurate. You'll end up overeating and overcomplicating a very simple process. So ignore it. 1 calorie goal. Now, when we say calorie goal, it's actually a range. Let's say that you calculate your calorie goal and it's 1,800, for instance. Well, then what that actually means is your calorie range is 1,600 to 2,000. Hear me now, as long as you are within that calorie range on a consistent basis, you will lose weight. It also gives you leeway for the ebbs and flows of life so that if you eat a little bit over 1,800 or under, you're fine. Nobody hits an exact calorie number every day. That would be damn near impossible. You don't have to hit an exact number. Life is not exact, and this process is not exact, nor is it perfect, nor should you be perfect, nor should you ever aim for perfection. That is the biggest thing that derails people in this process, thinking that it has to be perfect, or the mindset of, if it's not perfect, I won't do it. Calorie range. Next thing you're going to calculate, protein goal. Protein is very important. Why is it important? It helps you build muscle tissue, helps you maintain muscle tissue, even more importantly during this weight loss phase. A part of burning calories every day, a big part of it, is the thermic effect of food, right? The way that we expend energy every day is broken down into 4 categories. Your basal metabolic rate, which is the amount of calories it takes to run your body, and it's based on, in large part, your thyroid hormone, your active thyroid hormone, and your muscle tissue on your body, because muscle is a calorically expensive tissue, right? And so that's your basal metabolic rate, the amount of calories it takes for you to just run your body. It's the biggest category, 70% on average for people. The next biggest category is your non-exercise activity. So all the activity you spend when you're not exercising, right? Because if we think about it, exercise is a very small percentage of your day. It's only like an hour max of your day. Usually there's 23 other hours of the day. So what you do in that other 23 hours comprises more of your calories burned than does exercise. Makes sense when you look at it that way, right? So people with a higher step count have a higher non-exercise activity category when it comes to calories burned. The next largest is thermic effect of food. It's the amount of calories you burn digesting food. Yes, we use calories digesting food, and protein has the highest thermic effect of food. So the more protein you eat, the more calories you will burn digesting food. The final category and the smallest category, 5% on average, is your exercise. And so now that you've heard that, you understand that people spend the most amount of energy typically fixating on the smallest category of energy expenditure, when they should be looking at their protein intake, their step count, and what their body is comprised of, which the more muscle tissue you have, the more calories you'll burn at rest. And therefore, strength training should be your primary modality of exercise to cultivate that muscle tissue. Not saying you can't do other things, but strength training should be a part of your focus, a big part of it, okay? So the other part of it is thyroid hormone. And if you're in your 30s, 30 plus, everybody should get lab work. You should look at your amount of circulating free T3, your active thyroid hormone, and get that optimized if you haven't already, so that you're taking advantage of that other piece of basal metabolic rate, because hormones do impact the process. They don't stop it. They don't start it. They can impede it or speed it up. And that is why hormone replacement is the other side of what I do with Slay Hormone Solutions. For women in perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, hypothyroidism, PCOS, insulin resistance, PMS, you name it, we can help, and we'll get you feeling like doing everything else that I'm going to describe in this video. Because if you are your hormones, if you feel like shit, you're not going to feel like doing most of what I'm going to explain. So make sure you're checking that box as well. That being said, if your hormones are optimized, you still have to check the lifestyle boxes, or else you won't make any progress. So back to it. Protein. How to calculate a protein goal. You can take your goal weight in pounds and multiply it by 0.7 for a protein goal, or you can just aim for 100 grams or more. You can't eat too much protein unless you have pre-existing kidney disease. There is no upper limit for protein. As long as you're not going over your calorie goal, you can consume as much protein as you want. When it comes to macros, carbs and fats mean fuck all. They don't matter. Ignore them completely. Just focus on your total calorie range and your protein goal. You will probably not hit that protein goal at all, or even get close when you first start out. That's because the majority of the populace is chronically under-consuming protein. It takes time to build up to hitting 100 plus grams of protein. So if you don't hit that goal starting out, that's totally fine. Give yourself some grace. This takes time. It's a process. Protein is a very filling food. It's a very filling macronutrient, I should say. And so the more protein you eat, the fuller you're going to feel. And don't worry if you feel really full when you first start eating more protein. It's normal. It's a part of the process. As you walk more, as you strength train more, as you do all the other things that I'm going to describe in this video, you will be hungrier and will be able to consume more protein. And the more protein you consume, the better your results will be. So we have your total calorie goal. We have your total protein goal, right? Don't fixate on these numbers. Just get within a range and realize that you're not supposed to do it perfectly. You're supposed to just, instead, there's always a underlying skill or value we're looking to cultivate. So with calorie goal and protein goal, we're trying to cultivate the underlying value of, I value eating nutrient-dense foods that make me feel full, and high-protein foods that make me feel full and help me control my caloric intake so that I can consume less calories than I'm expending long-term consistently. I'm also cultivating the value of step count, which brings me to my next point. As I described, your total daily energy expenditure, a large portion of it, 15% or more on average for people, is comprised of your non-exercise activity. That's just your step count, y'all. People who walk more burn more calories. It just is what it is. That doesn't mean that it's solely restricted to walking. Your activity, walking around your house, doing laundry, doing chores, typing on a computer, using your brain. If you have a very creative job, you're going to use non-exercise activity calories burned here with those functions. Don't overthink it, but a great way to produce more fat loss during this first phase is to have a pulse on your step count. Download the Steps app and just note what your weekly total is. Your first question is always going to be, how much should I walk? You need to figure out how much you're walking now. It does us no good for me to recommend an overarching 10,000 step goal if you track your steps and figure out you're only walking 2,000 a day. The gap between 2,000 and 10,000, way too big. So instead, find out where you're at now and increase your weekly total by 200 to 300 steps per week on average, and you will lose body fat. It is indisputable. It is predictable. The more you walk, the more body fat you will lose, but you won't know what direction to go until you start tracking your steps and get a weekly total in the first place. It all starts with that awareness, all right? So increase your weekly step total as you go, and just increase it when you plateau primarily, because you might plateau throughout this process. But We have those three pieces in this fat loss phase. To guarantee we're in a caloric deficit, tracking calories is the best way. If you don't want to track calories, it's going to be harder for you. But if you eat more nutrient-dense foods and more high-protein foods, you'll be fuller and less prone to overeating. You combine that with a step count that is increasing over time, and you combine that with strength training, and you will put yourself in a very advantageous position to burn body fat or to lose body fat without tracking calories. But that being said, if you want to guarantee your progress throughout this and gain the tool, remember, it's always about underlying values and tools. If you want to cultivate the value of caloric awareness and understanding what foods have how much calories in them and how foods impact your energy and what a plate of food is supposed to look like when it comes to portion sizes, the only way to cultivate that intuitive skill is to track your calories. I tracked my calories for 6 years. I can look at a plate of food and know exactly how much protein, fat, and carbohydrates I'm getting from that plate of food because I tracked my food. You don't need to do it for 6 years, and you don't need to do it for the rest of your life. You need to do it for a short time span in order to gain the tools of intuitive eating. Tracking your calories does not cause eating disorders. People with pre-existing eating disorders sometimes may struggle with calorie counting because it gets obsessive. You don't have to make it obsessive. Make it as simple as possible and focus on a calorie range and a protein goal, and that's it. Disregard carbs and fats. Disregard the recommendations on MyFitnessPal. Just set your numbers and stick to those numbers, and don't get distracted by anything else. Fiber, another great way to satiate yourself, to put you in a caloric deficit if you're not tracking calories. So spreading your fiber intake throughout the day, aiming for 25 plus grams a day is a great way to be more satiated and decrease the likelihood of you overeating. Because I'm going to give you this one overarching truth, and it's one that hardly anyone wants to hear. The obesity epidemic is because people are overeating chronically in proportion to their energy expenditure. The average caloric intake in America is 3,400 calories. The average activity level in terms of exercise is less than 2 hours per week on average. So you have 3,400 calorie average and you have less physical activity. You have less than 2 hours of physical activity per week on average. That is a caloric surplus. That is a caloric surplus chronically, and people are gaining weight because they're not moving enough and they're eating too much. That is the overarching truth. There's no one food. There's no one thing. It is simply people's inability to cultivate values that get them out of the energy surplus. That being said, phase one is all about a consistent caloric deficit. You should look to average between 1/2 pound to 1.5 pounds per week of loss. If you average more than 1.5 pounds per week of loss, you're likely losing a little bit too fast. You can eat a little bit more. The goal in phase one, the goal for fat loss, period, is not to lose weight as fast as possible. It's to eat as much as you can while still losing weight. Why do we want to do that? Why do we want to slow down the process? Because it's not just about weight loss. It's about maintaining the muscle tissue that you have while losing weight. If you lose muscle tissue during the fat loss phase, you're losing the amount of calories you burn at rest because, again, like we said, muscle is a calorically expensive tissue. If you lose muscle, your basal metabolic rate falls. What this does, and why so many people stay stuck, is because they do extreme diets. In the process of doing the extreme diet, they lose muscle tissue. So let's just say you used to maintain your weight, your maintenance calories, where you neither gain nor lose, was 1,800. Then you do an extreme diet and you lose muscle. Okay, you lose weight, you lost 40 pounds, right? Great, but guess what? Now your maintenance calorie is 1,600. So when you start eating again, and you go back to normal eating, you're in a surplus way easier. That's why the weight rebound happens. Because if your maintenance calories was 1,800 and then you eat 2,200, well, that's just a 400 calorie surplus. At 1,600, 2,200 is a 600 calorie surplus. Then when you repeat the crash diet, now you've lowered your basal metabolic rate to 1,400. So now when you go back to 2,200, it's an 800 calorie surplus. This is why people not only start to fail with weight loss, and it takes more and more to see the same amount of loss, but also it's why people rebound so quickly, and they rebound faster and faster every time they crash diet. It's like, no matter what I do, I can't get these last 5 pounds off, and I gain weight super quick. Yeah, because you've lost muscle tissue, you're not strength training, you're not eating protein consistently, you're not walking a lot. Combine this with aging and skeletal muscle loss on top of it. This is why this is why things don't work the same way anymore for people. Okay? So we're going to do this right. We're going to get you out of this hole. The only way to get out of that hole is to do what I'm describing for you today. So once you have stayed in a caloric deficit, you're losing half a pound to a pound and a half you're losing half a pound to a pound and a half per week, and you get to your goal weight, or you get to a point where it's like, here's how to determine when to change phases, okay? And here's how to determine which phase you should be in to begin with. If you look at your naked body in the mirror and you say, I want to take things away. I want to reduce body fat in this area. I want to burn fat here. If you find yourself using that kind of language, you need to be in a caloric deficit. If you look in the mirror and you say, I want to add shape here, I want more butt, I want more of this, I want more muscle tone here, then you may need to go into phase 2, but 90% of people need to go into phase 1 before they go into phase 2, even if you're in it for a short period of time to lose just 5 to 10 pounds. Throughout phase 1, you need to lift weights. And then the question becomes, Maverick, if I can't really gain muscle in a caloric deficit, why would I lift weights? You need to lift weights because you want to maintain the muscle you have. Remember, I just described why you don't want to lose muscle tissue. If you lose muscle tissue, it decreases your basal metabolic rate and you're going to be in a worse position moving forward. Because phase 2 is all about gaining muscle tissue. So if you spend phase 1 losing muscle tissue, that's more muscle tissue for you to gain in phase 2. On top of that, we don't want to lose metabolism. The number one cause of decreased basal metabolic rate as people age, decreased metabolism, skeletal muscle loss. So we're not, again, everything that I described for you, every step has an underlying value. When it comes to your calorie range and your protein goal, we're cultivating the values of nutrient-dense foods, which, by the way, nutrient-dense foods are all the foods on the outside of the grocery store aisles, your fruits, your veggies, your meats, your dairy, your bread, you get it, legumes, etc. We're cultivating the value of consuming a lot of protein. We're cultivating the value of walking, right? And now we're cultivating the value of getting stronger. If you make those things values, you'll never struggle with fat loss, because fat loss and healthy body composition will be a byproduct of how you live your life. So with these steps I'm describing for you, there's underlying values being cultivated at the same time to carry you through the rest of your life. I'm not interested in how you look in 90 days. I'm interested in how you look and feel at 90. That's what this process does. So all of that being said, you're lifting weights, you're walking, you're eating protein, you're hitting that calorie range. You proceed this way for 6 to 8 plus months, depending on how much weight you have to lose. If you need to lose 100 pounds, phase 1 may be longer for you. If you need to lose 5 to 10 pounds, it may not take as long. That's okay. Your race, your pace. Don't pay attention to anyone else's progress. Everybody progresses at different rates based on a variety of factors. It's no secret, and I need you all to know, genetically, we're born with a predetermined amount of fat cells, where a lot of the results that you get are predetermined by genetics. Doesn't mean you should get discouraged. It doesn't mean that this is why you shouldn't compare, because your progress is unique to you. Within our program, where a lot of these variables are controlled on a very granular basis, even then, everybody progresses at different rates, right? A before-after could have 2 years between it. It might have 1 year between it. It just depends on how well you're able to implement from where you're at, how consistent you stay with these principles, your genetics, your lifestyle, your age, and your history. Somebody who's been chronically obese for 30 years probably is going to have a longer time in this process than somebody who has, lived more of these values consistently. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you should give up. It doesn't mean that you're screwed. It just means that you know exactly what to do now, and this is your opportunity to change your entire life with these values, because these values that you cultivate will bleed over into everything else you do. You will break a cycle of familial obesity and body struggles if you implement this process, because your kids are going to see you doing it, and then they're going to learn the right way. If you want your kids to watch you dieting and crying on the scale every Monday morning and then embody that, keep doing what you're doing. If you want to do it right, we're going to do it this way, because this is a way of living. So you stay in phase 1, 6 to 8 months. Typically, I'm just giving you an average range here. And then once you either hit your goal weight or you decide, okay, I'm ready to add shape to my body now. I'm in a place where I've decreased body fat substantially and I'm ready to shift gears. Phase 2 is all about building muscle tissue. So now that we've been in a caloric surplus, generally you want to be in a 100 to 200 calorie surplus, meaning 100 to 200 calories below maintenance, okay? Once we have Once we go into a muscle building phase, again, it's about having an excess of material. Now, just like we didn't want to rush the process in phase 1 and lose muscle, we also don't want to rush the process in phase 2. If you eat too far above maintenance in phase 2 while you're focusing on building strength and developing your muscle tissue, you run the risk of accruing excess body fat that will just have to shave off in phase 3. So the idea is to be about 100 to 200 calories above maintenance perpetually. We shift our focus from the scale and waist inches. By the way, you should be measuring your waist instead of looking at the scale perpetually. I recommend looking at the scale bi-weekly or every week in phase 1, just to get a trend over time. And more context on weight. I should have covered this already. You are going to gain weight some weeks during phase 1 because of regular fluctuations in the scale. You eat, you drink, you sweat, you have your menstrual cycle. Those of you who are still getting a cycle, it's going to fluctuate. And if you are getting your cycle, don't compare week 1 to week 3. Compare, for instance, week 1 of February to week 1 of March, right? Because in week 3 of your cycle, when your progesterone increases, you're going to have more body weight because of water retention. So don't compare week 1 to week 3. Compare the same week of 1 month to the same week of the next month. Can't drive that home enough. And then look at your trends over time. We want to average 0.5 pound to 1.5 pounds of loss per week, okay? That means that even if your weight goes up some weeks, that's okay, as long as you're still averaging 0.5 pound to 1.5 pounds. Zoom out and look at it from that perspective. Do not weigh yourself every day. It's a great way to drive yourself fucking crazy. Phase 2, we shift our focus or our metric from scale and inches to strength. Now, how do you want to lift? Here's where I'm going to polarize some folks, but we want to do the most efficient thing, in my opinion, for accomplishing the result that you have. If you want to be in phase 2 the least amount of time possible, you need to do the most efficient means of accruing muscle tissue. So that's going to be good old-fashioned weightlifting. Can you do Pilates? Yes. Can you do Orange Theory? Sure. Can you do bar? Can you do all these other things that people have popularized and enjoy doing in a group setting? You absolutely can. Are those things best for cultivating the result that you want during this process? No. All that means is, if we're looking at this from a skyscraper perspective and your result, as in getting the most amount of muscle tissue in the shortest time frame, again, not bulky, you will not get bulky, doesn't work that way, you don't have the hormones for it. People confuse bulk with body fat, which is what happens when you eat too far above maintenance while in a caloric surplus. Then you gain excess body fat, and people confuse that with bulkiness from weightlifting. Nobody gets bulky from weightlifting unless they're on steroids. Are you on steroids? I didn't think so. So that being said, if we picture it as a skyscraper, doing Pilates to gain muscle tissue, you can climb the floors, but you'll be capped at the 40th floor. This is an 80-floor skyscraper, by the way. Floor 40 is Pilates. When you lift weights, you can go to floor 80. Okay? You can still ascend the skyscraper, but you will be forever capped as far as your progress with things like Pilates, bar, etc., reformer, all that stuff. The reason is, in a group setting and when you're limited in the amount of weight that you can use, in a group setting, the instructor cannot pay as much individual attention as needed, and you can't get the time under tension and the focus and the mind-muscle connection and the intensity that you need in order to truly progress at an impactful level. Can you gain muscle from these modalities? Absolutely. Will you develop to your full potential? No, you will not. You will forever be capped, because you're capped with intensity, you're capped with your effort, you're capped with the amount of attention you can put on your individual progress. When you lift weights on an individual level, conventional weightlifting where you're scaling compound movements like squats, deadlifts, rows, shoulder press, pull downs, lunges, split squats, you're able to scale these movements on an individual level to their maximum capacity. So again, I'm not saying don't do things like Pilates and Orange Theory and F45 and all these other group classes. If you love them, do them. If they're fun, great, you've checked the fun box. Let's also check the progression box with some conventional strength training so that you can make progress during phase 2. And not only that, but quantify it. Keep track of your progress in your squats, in your rows, in your bench press, etc. And every week to 2 weeks, make sure that you're gaining strength by increasing the weight. How heavy should you lift? Use your reps as your guide. If you lift a weight for 10 reps and you could have done 25, well, then that weight wasn't challenging enough. You need to increase the weight, right? If you lift a weight and you can only do it 3 to 4 times, well, that weight's probably too heavy. So decrease it till you get to the 10-ish rep range, and then just continuously, progressively challenge yourself around the 10-ish to 15-ish rep range. And then each week say, well, last week I lifted 100 pounds 10 times. I'm going to try for 110 pounds for 10 times this week. And if you do 110 pounds for 10 reps, you got stronger. It's as simple as that, and just increase as you go. It's not about the frequency. It's not necessarily about the duration of time that you spend in the workout. It's about quality over quantity. How intense are you training? I'm spending a lot of time on the training piece because if you're in a caloric surplus and you're not lifting optimally, that surplus of calories that you're eating will just go to body fat. We want to use the surplus of calories to put towards muscle tissue growth and development. And to do that, you have to have adequate stimulus. Another reason why I'm going to push you to get into conventional weightlifting, because that will ensure that while you're consuming more calories than you're expending in the pursuit of gaining muscle tissue, that you are doing just that. If you consume caloric surplus and you do Pilates, chances are you're probably going to gain body fat, because the stimulus isn't intense enough on a muscle tissue breakdown level in order for you to develop in a substantial, impactful way that changes your naked body. That's what I'm here for. I'm not here to shit on other modalities. I'm here to push you in the direction that is the most efficient and most effective. Okay? I hope that makes sense. You're going to stay in phase 2 as long as possible. It's the most important phase. Why is phase 2 most important? Because you're adding skeletal muscle to your body that will benefit you for the rest of your life and keep you from ever having to diet again. You remember when I talked about getting out of that hole that people get into when they chronically crash diet? This is how you do it. The only way to raise your basal metabolic rate to where you get out of this metabolic adaptive hole is to increase the amount of calories you burn at rest, just functioning, breathing, right? And the only way to do that is to gain muscle tissue. On another level, hormones, but even with that, you still have to gain muscle tissue, and you have to put in the work to gain that muscle tissue. So you stay in a caloric surplus, and the only time you increase calories would be when you plateau in your strength. It's been like 2 or 3 weeks, and you're not getting any stronger. Maybe you start to feel more sore. You're not recovering. Increase calories by 100. Let's go back to the calorie part. Let's just say that you've been hitting 100 grams of protein consistently now that you're in phase 2. I would challenge you to restructure your macros in a way that where you're always increasing protein and keeping the same calorie amount until you need to increase. There's no upper limit to be found for protein. So if you can eat 150 grams, it's only going to help you. It's only going to help you. You're going to burn more calories digesting that protein. You're going to recover faster. You're going to develop faster. It's only going to help you, right? What are some sources of protein, since I keep talking about protein? You don't have to just eat meat. Every time I say eat protein, people think meat. You can eat legumes. You can eat fish. You can eat salmon, tuna. You can eat cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, eggs, obviously red meat, chicken, turkey, etc. You can eat those little ratio protein yogurts, Oikos 000 yogurts. I said cottage cheese. You can do whey protein isolate. Don't overthink the protein part as far as supplements go. Just get one that tastes good and that you will drink consistently. Protein supplements are not magic fairy dust. They're just additional protein to the protein that you're getting from food. All right. So those are all your sources of protein. Mix and match, get creative, and try not to eat the same thing every day. If you do that, you'll be sick of whatever it is you're eating every day in about 2 weeks. So switch up your protein sources as much as possible. Keep it interesting. Eat a variety of fruits and veggies, and to get your fiber intake, potatoes, legumes, get your fiber so that you can have consistent digestion. One digestive hack I have for this is called Heather's Tummy Fiber. It's a prebiotic fiber that helps you break down and digest your food better. It's hard to get that from food. It'll keep you regular to where your bowel motility is such that you're going 1 to 2 times a day. And then that makes room for more food so that you can build during this process, right? Okay, so phase 2, we're progressively increasing our strength. We're getting stronger and stronger. As you get stronger, you are gaining muscle tissue. That's a great indicator that you're headed in the right direction. Inevitably, during phase 2, you're going to get uncomfortable with how your clothes are fitting if you're doing this right, because you're developing your muscle tissue, okay? It's part of the game. It's the one thing that hardly any women are willing to do, all right? And I get it. I know it's uncomfortable. I have led many women through this process. I have seen women change their entire physiques and health with this process, but the only way you're going to do that and separate yourself from the herd that's obsessed with the scale and keeps dieting is if you commit to this process and stick with it. So the way to control your body fat, again, is to only increase your calories when you plateau in your strength, right? So again, so important to quantify your strength and not just rely on a group class. Or just because you're lifting weights every week doesn't mean you're progressing. Just because you're running around with dumbbells in your hands and flopping around and doing all kinds of shit in Orange Theory doesn't mean that you're progressing. You're not guaranteed progression just because you're lifting weights. You need to quantify and guarantee it. I want you to think of it this way. All of you want to do things very quickly. You want to do things the quickest way possible, and yet you avoid the quickest way to progress with your muscle tissue development like it's the plague because you think it's scary, because you're intimidated. I get it, but this is about doing uncomfortable things. Life's about doing uncomfortable things, and if you want to grow, you're going to have to do this. So in the gym, make friends, go up and talk to people, ask people for help. The biggest stroke to a man's ego is when you ask him for help with something to accomplish a task. So if you go up to a stranger in the gym and you say, hey, would you mind showing me how to do this? You have instantly validated that man's ego. You have positioned him as the quote unquote expert. He will be glad to help you with that exercise. I guarantee it. He will feel so good that you think he is an authority in the space. He will show you how to do that exercise. You gain the benefit of learning how to do it. He gains the benefit of feeling like a boss. And then maybe you have a new gym friend. You can ask women as well. Women are also happy to help. It's just I wanted to speak from the male perspective. So get in there, get uncomfortable, lift weights. If you guys watched the video of Mandy, she had never lifted a weight in her life, and now she's a freaking beast at 62, crushing it in the gym. That can be you too. Oh, by the way, Mandy was 62, had lupus and fibromyalgia, and was 253 pounds, 253 pounds. And if she can do it, you can fucking do it. Get in there. So phase 2 is all about gaining muscle tissue by gaining strength. Once you get to a point where you're like, oh my God, I can't stand this anymore. I've gained strength, but I'm about to pop out of my shirts, or you're just getting uncomfortable, give it another month. I'm telling you, the longer you can stay in phase 2 and build muscle tissue, the more grateful you'll be to yourself, because the muscle tissue you acquire in phase 2 will benefit you for the rest of your life. Now, the other factors, step count remains high. You want to maintain your step count. How high? It's a lever that you can push. It's not something that, it's not a huge focal point in phase 2 because it's all about gaining strength, but you want to keep it high, again, to stave off body fat. And also, going into phase 3, you don't want to all of a sudden recultivate the value of walking. So walking needs to be a persistent value for the rest of your life because it's something that is just wonderful to do for your body. My grandmother's 93 years old. The number one thing she's always done and has never skipped out on is her walking. She goes on walks all the time still to this day. I'm convinced that's why she's still alive and kicking. So walking is a longevity thing. It's a great lever to pull with fat loss, but it's a value you can give to your family and start adopting for the rest of your life. Again, there's what you say and what you live. In between is values. We're going to close that integrity gap. What you say, what you live, the gap is filled with values yet to be cultivated, right? Because I'm telling you, as you do this, as you cultivate these values, you're going to have to set boundaries in order to do the new things, right? You're going to have to say, hey, I can't watch Netflix with you tonight, honey. I need to go on a walk because I value my health. He'll either rise with you or he'll hold you back like an anchor. And now you've identified an anchor in your life that you may need to cut, because any half-ass caliber man will support you in this endeavor and do it with you, because this is about life. This is not a quick fix, crash diet, body transformation. This is a lifestyle that leads to body composition change and fat loss being a byproduct, and it bleeds over into everywhere. So this is for adults, not kids who want to keep crash dieting. Once you get to a point where you've gained substantial strength, and you can substantiate that with data by saying, yes, I increased my strength several fold in these compound exercises. By the way, if you want some more guidance on exercises and weight training, look at my Strength Training for Beginners podcast episode. I think it's like episode 8, maybe. You need to check that out. That'll give you a lot of beginner's guidance in that arena. Now we're going to go back into body fat loss, phase 3. Now, the difference between phase 3 and phase 1 is this. As a result of gaining muscle tissue in phase 2, you now burn more calories at rest. So whereas in phase 1, you may have needed, for example, 1,400 calories at the end of it to lose weight and get to your goal. Now you can lose weight at 1,800 calories, maybe 2,000 calories, maybe. So we're going to go back into a caloric deficit. You're going to subtract 100 to 200 calories from your intake and look to average half a pound to a pound and a half of loss per week. One thought you might have is, well, but aren't we just like going one way and then the other? What's the difference? I'll tell you, sweet summer child. You now have more muscle tissue. So now it's not just about losing the weight and decreasing body fat from where you were at. You're going to do so with more lean body mass. So we're merely stripping away the body fat covering the newfound muscle, and we need to do it slowly and methodically to maintain that precious tissue that you just worked so hard to gain in phase 2. So step count is there. I think steps are the lever that you pull to bust through a plateau as opposed to taking away calories, because your calories are your fuel and your nutrients at this point. So why the fuck would you take away fuel and nutrients when you can just walk more? Right? So let's just say you're averaging 7,000 steps a day and then you plateau during phase 3. And let me define a plateau as well. That's very important. A plateau is not, I didn't lose weight this week. No. A plateau is, I haven't lost weight or inches in my waist in 4 to 6 weeks. And I'm checking the boxes of consistently hitting my protein goal, consistently staying in my calorie range, and consistently strength training. If you're not checking those boxes, and step count. If you're not checking those boxes, it's not a plateau. You just need to check one of those boxes. But a plateau is, I have not lost weight or inches, and I'm checking those boxes of calorie range, strength training, protein intake, and steps, right? At that point, you can either increase your steps. If you were averaging 8,000, go to like 8,200. Okay, that'll move the lever. Or you can subtract 100 to 200 calories. I just recommend moving more before you take away calories. Eventually, you will have to take away calories because you can only walk so much in a week, right? But ideally, you move more rather than taking away nutrients. And the more you do that, the more muscle tissue you'll maintain, right? So you're going along, you're averaging half a pound to a pound and a half of loss per week, and you plateau. Look at your step count, look at your protein intake, look at your caloric intake, make sure you're honest to God being very, very consistent in those, and then just gradually decrease caloric intake until you get it moving again. And then how you know when to go into phase 4 or when you've done a successful phase 3 is when you look in the mirror and you see a substantially different body. Ideally, the end product here is a leaner body at a heavier body weight because you have more muscle tissue. Muscle is more dense than body fat, so it'll take up less space at the same weight. So people usually gain muscle tissue and look smaller because you're proportionally have less body fat because you gain muscle tissue, right? One, just shifting the proportions of one to the other. So all that being said, once you're at a point where you're like, I look damn good naked. Now, I want to say something about looking damn good naked. You need to be happy with your body where it is. You need to cultivate acceptance for your body where it is. If you have 100 pounds to lose and you weigh 250, you better love yourself at 250. And I say this because I've seen so many women get to their quote unquote goal weight and they're still not happy because that wasn't the problem. You're not going to be happier. You're not going to be happier at this destination. You're going to be happier because you're living what you say. You're going to be happier because you've accepted your humanness. You're going to be happier because you're talking less shit to yourself and you're talking back to your inner critic and your inner judge. You're going to be happier because you're giving your kids a shot at living a different life with their health than the example that you were given, a very unevolved example. You're going to be happy for yourself because you've chosen to be with yourself, be more present, and not keep focusing on next thing, right? Life is good where you're at. I need you to know that. Life is good where you are at. But obviously, being healthier and having a healthier body and moving and being confident in the way you look naked, etc., those are all huge bonuses to this. But they are just that, bonuses. I can't stress that enough. Because that way, when you go into phase 4, you won't be dissatisfied. Phase 4 is about maintaining for life. So phase 4 is shifting away from calorie counting. I highly recommend most of you, you can keep tracking calories, but tracking calories is a tool. It is not something you do for the rest of your life. It is a tool to achieve a result. It's a tool to guarantee an outcome. Look at it like this. You needed a calculator to calculate 2 plus 2 when you were in second or third grade. And then once you learned 2 plus 2 in your head, you no longer needed the calculator. That's how calorie tracking is. But you can't gain the skill of being able to do it in your head until you use the calculator, right? And that's why we want to make it as simple as possible. People overcomplicate the fuck out of calorie tracking. It's really quite simple, all right? So phase 4 is about moving away from that. You maintain the values that you've cultivated by now of eating high protein, or just making protein a priority, walking more, and getting stronger. You now know how to control your body and control your outcome with your body. The shittiest feeling is being out of control with your body. This process puts you in the driver's seat forever. And so it's not just about the results that you get, but the values you cultivate to maintain the results forever. Let's talk about some nuances of the process. Where does processed food fit in? Where do indulgences fit in? They fucking fit in. The more rigid you're eating, the less likelihood of you sticking to anything. People fail because they eat too strictly and in a way that is too rigid. It causes cravings, and then they indulge, or they have a binge, and they think that they failed, and then they give up. Well, if your approach wasn't so rigid to begin with, that wouldn't have happened. So throughout your week, remember that you have a calorie range. If we zoom out and look at your weekly caloric intake, you'll see how much room you really have for an indulgence. For instance, if you do goal weight times 12 and it puts you in a caloric deficit, and let's say that caloric deficit for you is 1,800 calories, just throwing numbers out there, right? Let's just say 2,000. I'm going to use 2,000 to make it easier math because I'm not a mathematician. 2,000 times 7 days in a week, that's 14,000 calories. You have 14,000 calories, that's your range per week, right? Or what have you. So if your range is 1,800 to 2,200, right? Because it's like 200 calories more or less makes the range, right? And then if you look at what 1,800 times 7 would be, let me do that math. Screw it, I'm going to have to do math for this. All right, so if you do 1,800 times 7, you get 12,600. If you do 22,000 times 7, you get 15,400. So 12,600 to 15,400 is your range, right? So you've got about 1,400 calories each direction. If you think 1,400 calories each direction for the week, 1,400 calories, that's indulging a few times a week. Furthermore, you don't have to eat perfect to get the result. What I mean by that is, if your calorie goal is 1,800 and you have hit your protein goal for the day, or you're damn close, and you've got 300, 400 calories left, you better fill that with an indulgence. That is a perfect day, my friend. Because if you were to just eat rigid for the sake of being rigid for that last 400 calories, you won't get any better results than the person who fills that with donuts. I'm not fucking around. I'm not bullshitting you. People will eat clean, whatever the fuck that means, for the sake of eating clean, but it doesn't give you any better fat loss results. Yes, obviously, nutrient-dense foods provide more micronutrients, and micronutrients, which are just vitamins and minerals, help you feel better and function better, of course. But it doesn't mean you only eat those foods, that you don't have to do that. Life is about balance. You're going to have ebbs and flows of your life. So if you are able to take that expectation of perfection off yourself and realize that nobody's perfect, the before afters you see plastered all over my social media and website, they're not perfect. You don't have to be perfect. You shouldn't be perfect. Please don't be perfect. Fill your calories with some indulgences here and there. Processed foods are delicious. They have a place. They have a place. That's how you enjoy life and also get the result. One is not at the expense of the other. You can have both. So throughout this process, don't be afraid to indulge in some foods you love and develop that consistent result, right? What I mean by that is you have this belief that says if I eat cake, I'm going to get fat no matter what. Well, that's not truth. Truth is you can eat cake every single fucking day as long as you're in your calorie range and still lose body fat. But in order for you to believe that, you're going to have to eat the thing you love consistently within your calorie range and see it equate to you not getting fat in order to dissolve that belief. So I highly recommend you keep indulgences in here and there. The biggest mistake people make as well on a weekly basis is eating too rigid during the week and then going fucking ham on the weekends because you were too rigid during the week. If you indulge throughout the week, you don't feel the need to binge on the weekends because there's no cravings. You did the thing that your body wants. That which you resist persists, y'all. So it's not about deleting the thing you love from your life. If the approach that you have adopted makes you delete something from your life in order to achieve the result, that shit's broken. So instead, let's get realistic with it. This is how our clients get the results they do, because we unravel these beliefs that society, your family, etc. has given you. Or is he the influencer saying fucking oatmeal is going to kill you or something? Christ. In addition to that, we want to think about how this is going to impact your family, how this is going to impact your relationships. You're going to have to set boundaries as a result of this, right? So when you're adopting protein as a priority, you're adopting a step count as a priority, you're adopting strength training, that means you're going to have to move a little differently. And so if there were dynamics that were unhealthy or not congruent with the new goals that you have, you're going to have some uncomfortable conversations. And so the bonus of this process is those uncomfortable conversations that you have will result in new boundaries being set and peace on the other side. If you've been avoiding these uncomfortable conversations, say with your husband who's constantly eating bullshit in front of you, and since he's a male with higher testosterone and more lean body mass, he doesn't suffer from it like you do. That's just reality, by the way. Men have higher lean body mass at higher basal metabolic rate as a result. Therefore, his calorie cushion's way bigger than yours. That motherfucker's burning about 22 to 2,400 calories a day just living. So if he eats an 800 calorie cheesecake, he might still be in a deficit. You're going to be in a 400 to 600 calorie surplus. Couples who mirror each other's eating habits screw over the woman every time. So you're going to have to move differently. You require your own approach. You have a different body. You have a different basal metabolic rate, and therefore uncomfortable conversations will have to be had. If he supports you, wonderful. He can come along for the ride. If not, cut him the fuck out of your life. Anyway, other nuances of this process. Question I get a lot is cardio. You never mentioned cardio. Yeah, cardio is not really important. It's great for your health. It's not a sharp tool in the toolbox when it comes to burning calories, because people are like, oh, I want to speed up the process. Great. Oh, okay. Yeah, you can do cardio. You should do cardio. It's good for you. It's just not a big mover in the fat loss puzzle, right? If you do a shit ton of it, it will impact your weightlifting. We don't want you to overdo cardio at the expense of your weightlifting, because your weightlifting is the most important producer of results in this. So again, it comes down to balance. Neither one is good or bad. I'm not saying one is at the expense of the other. Cardio can help your weightlifting as long as you're conscious of when it starts to impact it negatively. When people do high intensity interval training and it depletes their glycogen and they have a weak ass workout because of it, now it's counterproductive. So just keep a pulse on everything, right? You can do Orange Theory, you can do F45, you can do body pump, you can do all these things. Also, make sure you're lifting some weights a couple times a week and getting stronger so that you can get the results that you want. Please hear me. So many people hear what I just said and attack me because they think that I'm assaulting their character for saying that what they're doing isn't the most effective way to produce the result. I'm not saying stop doing something you love. I'm merely advocating the thing that gets you to where you want to be the fastest, all right? So phase 4, back to the process. You want to kind of wean yourself off of calorie tracking. Start trusting yourself to make higher protein choices. For example, we have so many clients that go on vacation and they're stressed out because they're like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my progress. What they find is that on vacation, they subconsciously now move differently. They already prioritize the protein when they go to a buffet. They're already walking more. They're already hydrating more. They just subconsciously do these things as a result of our process and therefore don't gain a pound. They actually lose weight. This will happen to you too. Because of the time you spend in phases 1 through 3, you now have these underlying values that persist for the rest of your life. And you just keep practicing those values. And then it just becomes a matter of, do I want to get stronger, add more shape? Cool, I'll just up the calories a little bit. Do I want to lean out a little bit for this vacation I got in about 6 months? Cool, I'll just decrease the calories a little bit. I'm not going to crash diet. I'm not going to take, I'm not going to fucking load up on cleanses and detoxes before the class reunion because I already look great because of the values that I live. Oh, I also feel less stress on a day-to-day basis because I have a whole new outlook and worldview on how food affects my body. I have balance. Even though, and this is the other thing, even though people are constantly criticizing my approach because they're on that crowded road of people who want to do things fast and overnight and constantly fail because of it, I'm staying consistent with my values. This is the walk you're going to have to walk. You may even lose some friendships as a result of doing this differently because it offends those who are insecure when you start to progress and move differently. That's a big part of this. You're going to move differently. People are going to be jealous. People are going to criticize you and try to keep you on that crowded road and help you suffer with them. I love women. I love working with women. I will do it for the rest of my life in some aspect. But I found that you all like to suffer together. And your friends can sometimes be a cancer to your progress and you keep them around because you don't want to hurt their feelings. That's another uncomfortable conversation you're going to have. Hey, Deborah, listen, I love you to death. You're super hilarious. We've been friends since kindergarten. Thing is, I'm trying to be healthier and you're holding me back because of the way that you live your life. It's not congruent with the way that I live mine. I need you to respect what I'm doing. You don't have to do what I'm doing, but you're going to have to respect it and support me. That is how this friendship is going to work moving forward. Direct, transparent. That's how life progresses. If you want more progress, and people who really support you will support that directness and that transparency, right? It may hurt them in the moment because they're like, I'm not living healthy. You'll help them realize they're not living a healthy lifestyle. And you're empowering them at that moment to make the choice to step their shit up. They're not a victim of your lifestyle. You're empowering them to raise their waterline with you. And as you raise your waterline as a woman, as a person, people around you will either swim or they will sink. That includes your partner. Your kids are only going to thrive. Your kids are going to win. Your kids are going to watch you doing this and they're going to learn the right way to do it. And your kids are going to fucking thrive because of the decisions you're making. No longer self-abandoning, no longer serving everyone else at your own expense. They're going to, instead of learning that they have to self-abandon to meet everyone else's needs, they're going to watch you thrive and pour into yourself, and they're going to turn around and do the same thing for themselves, and they're going to show up like you're showing up, which is fucking awesome.